Thank you. Thank you. The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1 I call Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it expects to conclude negotiations with Peel Ports regarding the purchase of Ardrossan Harbour.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hiswell.
As I confirmed to the Ardrossan Task Force in Arran last week, CMAL are leading on commercial discussions with Peel Ports Group, and these discussions are currently ongoing. These are commercial and confidential discussions, and I cannot comment on the detail at this point. There is a requirement to agree heads of terms between Peel Ports Group and CMAL before any change of ownership could be confirmed, following a fair and negotiated settlement and due diligence undertaken by CMAL on behalf of Scottish ministers. The potential transaction could be finalised by summer 2025, dependent on progress in these discussions.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. It's now almost 10 years since the redevelopment of Ardrossan Harbour was proposed, with no discernible progress. Eventually, 9 weeks ago, the Cabinet Secretary announced the Scottish Government would explore options to buy the harbour from private owner Peel Ports. Since then, much to the frustration of my constituents, there has been little word from Scottish ministers on when such discussions will conclude, and again we have heard no firm date, or even who is undertaking them on the Government's behalf. So in the interest of transparency, can the Cabinet Secretary say who is leading negotiations for the Scottish Government and how often they have met with Peel Ports since the 18th of February?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I indicated in my original answer, CMAL are leading on commercial discussions with Peel Ports Group. I had the opportunity to talk to the Isles of Arran Ferry Committee and gave them that update last week. I also was in Ardrossan, where I also met with campaigners who have been heavily involved, and part of my discussions with them was relaying them the importance of securing that purchase. On the purchase of that harbour, we can provide the investments and, importantly, the level of investment, which I'm sure the member readily understands. I also was able to reiterate to him, to both groups, that the Scottish Government is committed to Ardrossan, and that in our interim support for Ardrossan, I've made it quite clear that on behalf of the representations of the member, Kenny Gibson, the constituency MSP themselves and the Isle of Arran Ferry Group, that the return of the Caledonian Isles will see operating out of Ardrossan. There will be a two-port solution to make sure that as long as is possible the Ardrossan harbour is used.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that further reply. Many Arran and Ardrossan constituents are understandably upset and angry at the Scottish Government's apparent lack of urgency in concluding the discussions with regard to the harbour's redevelopment and taking it forward. Central Ardrossan is one of Scotland's 5 poorest communities, where 44% of households survive on benefits. 165 jobs directly depend on the harbour, and they're in limbo while vulnerable elderly Arran residents have been transferred to the mainland as care workers struggle to travel to and from Ardrossan. The outlined business plans for harbour redevelopment have been imminent, it seems, for years. When will they finally and definitively be published? And when does the Cabinet Secretary envisage a contract for the redevelopment of Ardrossan Harbour going out to tender?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, quite clearly, a tender would be far preferable should the harbour come under the ownership of the Scottish Government, and the works that CMAL are preparing, both in the short, medium and long term, can then be developed and indeed published. And I recognise the desire from the local community to understand when works on Ardrossan Harbour will begin and what those works will be and how they will be scheduled. But such a timeline can only be reasonably established and published on the actual purchase and transfer of control of the port. I do not want to take part in anything that would compromise what are commercial and confidential negotiations. It really is important that the Scottish Government and the funders from our taxpayer base will understand it's important that we get the best value from that. If you want to speed a negotiation and compromise a negotiation and compromise the value for the public purse, then I think there's a risk in me going into the type of commitments that, quite understandably, Kenny Gibson wants me to make in the here and now. But he makes a very central point, and that's about the regeneration that is going to be required around Ardrossan, regardless of what happens and when with the harbour. The harbour is central to that, I understand that, but part of my discussions also with the Save the Ardrossan Harbour campaign and also with the Isle of Arran Ferry Committee and indeed also with the task force was the importance that once we've had the short, medium and long-term plans set out for the harbour, that alongside that we need to see the regeneration of that vitally important area that I understand that Mr Gibson is so passionate about.
Sue Webber.
Thank you. Time is of the essence, Cabinet Secretary. Residents of Ardrossan have been messed about by the SNP ever since this ferry fiasco started a decade ago, with one resident saying why anyone would commission a ferry that doesn't fit Ardrossan Harbour for the route it is meant for is crazy. And given the limitations outlined in your previous answers, Cabinet Secretary, can you guarantee the negotiations will actually deliver for Arran and Ardrossan residents? And how much money has the Cabinet Secretary allocated to upgrade Ardrossan Harbour in the event of a successful purchase?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would point out that the Conservatives refused to support the budget which contained funding for Ardrossan Harbour.
Thank you, members.
I would also point out, if she doesn't understand, and perhaps she might want to look into that history, regrettably a long history of what's happened at that harbour, it is owned by a private company. The original plans for Ardrossan Harbour were to be developed by the private company Peel Ports and Ayrshire Council. And North Ayrshire Council. So in terms of what do I see as the best option I see it to get the level of investment that I think is required. I'm sure she also understands the UK subsidy control measures, which again her government brought in. If she understood that, if she understands the basis of business commercial negotiations, she would understand that there has to be space and time for successful negotiations to take place, and her line of questioning does not help that.
Jamie Green.
Thank you. Just before recess, I met with campaigners from Ardrossan in my office in Largs, and they made it clear that whilst any move to end this impasse over Ardrossan Harbour is welcome, what is happening at the moment is that businesses in Ardrossan on the High Street are going bust. They're losing footfall, they're losing traffic and they're losing money. So in that vein, will the Cabinet Secretary speak with Cabinet colleagues and look to establish a small business fund that would help those small local businesses in Ardrossan tide them over for the meantime, because they simply cannot wait for that footfall to return whilst that port is being redeveloped?
Cabinet Secretary. I understand the member's request. I think it's something that should be considered at the appropriate time. He may have heard me say that I was committed because of the intervention by Kenneth Gibson and also the Isle of Arran Ferry Committee itself to ensure that Ardrossan operates as long as is possible, and obviously the Caledonian Isles sailing from Ardrossan when it returns will help in that short term. But you will also be aware, and I think this is a really important point in the regeneration, the works that will be required at Ardrossan Harbour will cause disruption, and I think he's quite right to identify that that will need active discussion and ongoing discussion with local businesses as to what happens in that period.
Question number 2, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that 506 sex offenders in Scotland have changed their name in the past 2 years.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, there are not 506 individuals that have changed their name. There are 506 instances where any form of registered name was changed or updated. When a name is changed, that change is made across multiple records, so would involve a change to, for example, registered email address or registered gym membership card, etc. So multiple instances of a reported change could be attributed to a smaller number of individuals that may have changed some detail of their name. Sex offender notification requirements apply to the individual, irrespective of what name they use, and where a registered sex offender changes names, they must let the police know within 3 days or they breach their notification requirements.
Liam Kerr.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but I'm not sure that querying the figures in an FOI is going to reassure the public particularly. And disappointingly, what I didn't hear there was a commitment to legislate to ensure that this is absolutely watertight. The Cabinet Secretary must surely see that this is a system open to abuse. Now, the Scottish Conservatives have been calling on the government to implement changes around sex offenders changing their name for years, similar to those in the UK Crime and Policing Act. So will the Cabinet Secretary now commit to bring in similar legislation to Scotland before the next election?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me start by assuring Mr Kerr that my officials are in regular contact with Police Scotland and indeed officials across the UK in relation to all matters in and around public protection. The UK Crime and Policing Bill, which is currently before the UK Parliament, does include proposals around sex offenders and name change, and I can assure Parliament that Scottish ministers are actively considering extending these measures to Scotland.
Liam Kerr.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that, but I think what will also worry people is whether, in addition to the up to 506 sex offenders we know have changed their name, there are others who will have done so but have failed to report it or to register it. So what steps has the Cabinet Secretary taken since Scottish Conservatives revealed the scale of this problem to find out who they are, as well as ensuring that those who have done so in the last 2 years are being monitored properly?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, there are, of course, very strict requirements for registered sex offenders, and I'm sure all members will appreciate and accept that Police Scotland take their obligations very seriously in this regard. There is an important matter to consider here, particularly in and around the Crime and Policing Bill, because I am very mindful of the need for at times consistency across these small isles, across border, particularly in very sensitive matters of policing. And again, I want to reassure the member and indeed Parliament that I have written to the UK Government. I am following an internal process within the Scottish Government, and as soon as I am able to, I will be informing Parliament on our next steps on this very important matter.
Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary perhaps can clarify, because Liam Kerr was quite explicit in his question and in terms of the FOI information he received, that there were 506 sex offenders who changed their names. And the Cabinet Secretary seemed to suggest something else. So some clarity, please, in the response about the veracity of the information that Liam Kerr received. And can I ask her, of the 506 name changes, how many were followed by breaches of licence conditions, reoffending, or just disappearance from police data?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I have actually answered a very similar question in Chamber before in relation to this. Actually, I think, if my memory serves me correct, it may have been a question from Murdo Fraser. So let me repeat, when a name is changed, that change is made across multiple records, so would involve change to, as I said earlier, gym membership, registered email addresses, and so a name can be changed on multiple records, and that will be attributed to a smaller number of individuals. The information that Mr Kerr, both Mr Kerrs refer to, relates, I believe, to a freedom of information from Police Scotland. We can, of course, try and clarify that information further, and I would be happy to write to both Mr Kerrs further on this matter.
And Douglas Ross.
Sorry, I don't think the Cabinet Secretary should be offering to write. She has come to the Chamber today to ask a lodged question where she knows the query is about 506 sex offenders changing their names. Yep. So if she can confidently stand up and say that is not 506 individuals, it is the number of changes made, can she tell us how many sex offenders have changed their names? That is a simple question that she must be able to answer, given what she has previously said.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is of deep regret that members seem incapable of listening. So let me repeat once again that on the information that is at my disposal, from Police Scotland is that there are not 506 individuals. Please, Presiding Officer, I am not putting up with this.
This is just a
Sorry, Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not putting up with this.
Mr Ross, when you have put a question, please be courteous and listen to the response quietly. Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary, sorry, I did not hear what was going on there, but I would ask members to behave in accordance with our standing orders. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Mr Kerr did indeed ask a reasonable question, but it is of deep regret to me that members in this Parliament behave like children when we are discussing the most serious matters about public protection and the risk that are presented to members of our community as a result of sex offending. And I have went to lengths that are right and proper in terms of my engagement both with the past and current UK Government in and around how we can cooperate on these matters in a pragmatic way, bearing in mind that we all share an island irrespective of our different legal systems. And let me repeat, just for accuracy, there are not 506 individuals that have changed their name.
Cabinet Secretary, Mr Ross, I will not ask again that you refrain from shouting from your seat when you have not been called to speak. That is the last time I will ask you. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, perhaps it would be better if I just referred the member to the earlier three answers that I have already given in this matter, and I repeat my commitment to both Mr Kerr to write to them further.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. Point of order, Douglas Ross.
Presiding Officer, you have been very critical of those of us who are speaking from a sedentary position, and I accept that. But can you confirm from the Chair that, despite being asked on 3 occasions, the Cabinet Secretary has not been able to inform this Parliament of how many sex offenders have changed their name? It is a basic question that we are not getting answers to.
Mr Ross, that is not a point of order. That is not a point of order. Mr Ross, that is not a point of order. Right. Mr Ross, would you like to leave the chamber? Because if you wish to remain here, you must adhere to our standing orders.